the Geneva FIDE Grand Prix tournament. This is from the game Hou Yifan versus Anish Giri. And we're at the 53rd move. White just played G3. White is Hou Yifan, by the way. And Giri is black and has just exchanged a pair of rooks. So as you can see, Hou Yifan is white here and is down a pawn and trying to draw this rook and pawn endgame. And one of the main problems here is that Giri has her king cut off here on this file. And the basic plan for black is just simply to use his king to assist these pawns and create a passed pawn. There's a 2-to-1 majority here. So the rook is not going to be able to stop these pawns alone. So the king has to get over, the white king that is, Hou Yifan has to get over to assist the rook in stopping these pawns and perhaps draw. So let's see what happened. Okay, so Giri played king h6, of course, continuing with his plan to push the pawns. Yifan attacks the rook, of course. The rook just stays put, keeping the king cut off. So she attacks the pawn, attacks the pawn there with the rook. Giri protects, attacks the other pawn, and it's pretty elementary. Now, I like this little maneuver that Giri does here. Now, perhaps he could have just simply pushed the pawn also. There's not really much white can do about this plan of pushing his pawns and keeping the king cut off. Her only hope is to eventually start checking from the back with the rook. You know, exchange one pawn and just try to keep checking, and then when the black rook comes over to defend, hopefully be in a position with the king to be able to intercept the pawn down here. But I like this maneuver of Giri. So he plays rook g6, protecting this pawn and attacking this pawn. So white definitely can't afford to drop the g pawn. So therefore, rook f2, forcing the rook into a passive position. King g4, king e1. So now the rook has left the e file. This gives the white king the opportunity to come over to the king side. But this is all a nice trap set up by Giri. So check with rook e6. Now, if the king goes back, Giri has just made progress, because now this rook on f2 is in a worse position defensively than it was in. The king will be cut off again, and this pawn will just advance. And again, black's king is in a better position than it was in previously. So Yifan goes to f1, and you know, obviously to get back here. But with the king and queen lined up, this gives a trivial win to Giri, forcing the rooks off the board. Now, if you know anything about the key squares in the endgame, you can see that this is just simply a real trivial win at this point for white. And if you have trouble understanding what key squares are, check out some of my endgame videos. I think I have a video called What Are Key Squares, where I explain them. And when you understand what the key squares are, you can tell, you know, if you're winning, you can win the endgame, just without any calculation whatsoever. So after the exchange, okay, we see this pawn back here, and the only thing that has to be done is these two pawns are traded off, and it's a trivial win for white. The reason why is because the key squares in this situation. Let me get rid of the key squares in this situation for black, or here, the key squares for this particular pawn. Okay, I'm not counting the H pawn or because it's irrelevant. The important pawn is the F pawn, and those are the key squares. So once black is already occupying one of them. So once the G and H pawns are traded off, that is a wrap, and there's no way to not get the pawns traded off. If, for instance, if black played H3, for instance, and then white played G3, well, then the pawn would just push again, and eventually the king would be forced to stop it, and the pawn would get traded off. Anish goes here. King G1. And of course, even here, this move probably wasn't necessary, but he's making sure that white has no counterplay, and basically giving her an incentive to resign here. But at the same time, he has to be very careful. Like, let's look at this, for instance. H3 takes. Remember, here's the key squares. And then white should be able to draw here, because black cannot occupy this important square here. So, of course, if the pawn pushes, then the king goes up. Okay, so that would be out of the picture. If here, then here. You see? There's no way for black to win. So, that's why understanding key squares are very important. Right? So, if you were racing in time trouble, and you figure you had a win and you just played that, then you would be surprised after this move. Because then it would be just a draw, as black would not be able to occupy the key squares. So, this is why, ladies and gentlemen, Giri played this move. Remember the key squares. He keeps control of that. Hou Yifan goes to G1. And now, notice too how Giri is keeping the opposition with the king. King F1. And now H3 is acceptable and has to be captured, because now, right, these squares are easily accessible to the black king, and white cannot get over there, as in the previous variation, to block the king out. Of course, she doesn't want to take. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, this would be a stalemate. So he backs up again, and now she takes, and again, all Giri has to do is get to this square right here. All three of these are key squares. So if black can occupy any one of them, he wins this game by force. So she cannot stop him from getting to one of those squares. That's where Giri goes. He goes here. And again, resistance is futile, because even though white gives up gains the opposition here, black always has a will have a pawn push when it's needed. He simply goes back, and the game is over. Because here's just a little thing I'll show you. If he pushes here, critical squares move up to here, right? But the king F2, king F4, the white king has to move somewhere. Getting back to the game. So king g2 and king f4 by Giri. But instead of going to f2 in this situation, white can try maybe f1 or g1. But in all cases, for instance g1, black can always obtain the opposition. Again, back to the game. Here is where Hou Yifan resigned. There's nothing she can do. If she goes to here, again trying to get the opposition, then you just make that pawn push. No matter which way the king goes, whether it's here, the black king goes there, or here, you go over here, and then the same thing. So he tries to go back again. No matter which side you choose, you go to the opposite side and squeeze white out of these important squares. Can't go there anymore, and then the game would be over. So that was it. I just want to show you that endgame is a very long game, but it's an instructive game, instructive ending, and you know, it should be, you know, known. It's very important to know how to win these type of positions, especially you know, in time trouble. You want to be able to like blitz these positions, you know, out. And I didn't see this game as it was going, but this is like, this type of stuff is like you know, close to being no-brainer, especially for, you know, like a master player or something like that. It's you know, once you just realize, you know, that's why he keeps this is why Giri keeps his pawn back here, because he already knows, okay, key squares, and you just always make sure that you can get to one of them. Cuts the king off, simplifies the position. Now the key squares are here. Make sure not to fall into stalemate situations, which would be real disappointing, or, you know, allowing you know, theoretical draws, and you know, he just maintains the win. So good game there by Giri.